Let no one caught in sin remain inside the lie of inward shame, but fix our eyes upon the cross and run to Him who showed great love and bled for us. Freely you bled for us. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling over death by death. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead, we are one with Him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Beneath the weight of all our sin, you bow to none but heaven's will. No scheme of hell, no scoffer's crown, no burden great can hold you down. In strength you reign forever. Let your church proclaim. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling over death by death. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead, we are one with Him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. And oh, death, where is your sting? And oh, hell, where is your victory? And oh, church, come stand in the light. The glory of God has defeated the night. Singing, oh, death, where is your sting? And oh, hell, where is your victory? And oh, church, come stand in the light. Our God is not dead, He's alive, He's alive. Not dead, He's alive. And Christ is risen from the dead, trampling over death by death. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead, we are one with Him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling over death by death. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead, we are one with Him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Rise up from the grave. Jesus, all for Jesus, all lying in time, and ever hope to be. Jesus, Jesus. All for Jesus. All I am endeavor hope to be. For it's
Well, we're over halfway through Lent. We've had 22 days of fasting, and this is now our 4th day of feasting. Have you been able to match your weekly rhythm to the Lenten rhythm at all? If so, let us know about it. We'd love to hear about how you've been able to dig into Lent this year. Today we're exploring the final pillar discipline of the season, generosity. Traditionally, this was known as almsgiving, the practice of giving money to the poor. Now, since the early days of Israel, God has shown his love for the poor. The law contains commands like this one from Deuteronomy 7. If there are any poor Israelites in your towns, when you arrive in the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them. Instead, be generous and lend them whatever they need. Field owners were to leave some of their crop in the field for the poor to come collect, and the tithe was to be used to feed the priests, the poor, and the vulnerable. Clearly, God cares about the poor around the world, and he cares that we care about the poor among us. So what are we to do this Lent? Traditionally, we have been encouraged to take the money that we save from not eating meat or drinking alcohol or expensive lattes and donate it to the poor or to a charity that works among the less fortunate. And if you've given up something that usually costs you money this Lent, then by all means lean into this tradition. But if you haven't given up a physical luxury, perhaps this is a time to look at your finances and see where your money goes. How much of it goes towards meeting your own desires, not needs, but wants? Is God calling you to let go of some of those pleasures, or even just postpone them for a little to create the financial space to join God in providing for the poor? At the end of the day, God does not need your money. He created everything from nothing, and if he wanted to feed the world with manna from heaven, he could. But in his wisdom, he has invited us to step into our calling as stewards of this world and care for those who need our help. So this week, I challenge you to find a way to give to the poor, either directly or through Rockpoint's Compassion Fund or through another charity. Commit to sacrificing just a little of your luxury so others can eat. However, if you're hearing this message and feeling resentful or angry, hold off for a few days. Pray about it. Talk to God about the resources he's given to you. As I said, he is inviting us into the joy of providing for others, not demanding that we fork over what we need to live off of. And if he speaks to you, I encourage you to listen and obey. Those are the marks of a true disciple. Listen and obey, no matter where that leads, no matter the cost. Until next week, Rockpoint.
Hey Rockpoint, it's me, Stephanie, here to bring you what you need to know this weekend. Thank you to everyone who participated in the candidating weekend last weekend. It was a busy and important couple of days in the life of our church family. If you attended, prayed, asked questions, joined in online, or submitted feedback, thank you. This is an exciting time here at Rockpoint, and the Board of Elders would like to remind you that you have until the end of the day, March 10th, to provide feedback at leadpastorfeedback@rockpoint.ca. Next weekend, at our services and through our various means of communication, the Board of Elders will be providing an important update. Please continue to pray that God's will would be done for Rockpoint, Stafford, and the entire Greer family. 55 Connect will be hosting a special Easter dinner and drama performance at Rockpoint Bearspaw on Friday, March 22nd from 5:30 to 9 p.m. Deanna Storfey of Acting Up Drama will be performing a dynamic one-person drama entitled Impossible Faith, the story of Corrie ten Boom. All adults are invited to attend this special evening. Tickets are $30 each and are available through our website or can be purchased in person after the services this weekend. The last day to register is March 18th at noon. There are also volunteer opportunities available for the evening, so if you're interested in helping make this outreach event happen, make sure to chat with someone at the ticket sales table or email Stephanie Gruno. Speaking of Easter, Easter weekend is just around the corner, and with that comes some special services to be aware of. Our Good Friday service for all sites will be taking place at Bearspaw again this year at 10 a.m. on Friday, March 29th. Easter Sunday services will take place at each site at their normal weekend times, but we'll also be having an Easter sunrise liturgical service at Bearspaw at 7 a.m. Whether you're an early bird or you're like me and find getting up before the sunrise a bit more challenging, this will be a beautiful and meaningful way to kick off your Easter Sunday celebrations. All sites are welcome. That's all for me. If you have questions about anything I mentioned today, remember all this information and more can be found in our weekly newsletter and on our events page. Lastly, a reminder that whether you are new to Rockpoint or have been attending for a long time, if you're looking to get in contact with someone from the church, don't forget that our digital Connect card can be accessed and filled out by going to rockpoint.ca/contact or by scanning this QR code. Have a great week, Rockpoint.
Today, one of the foundational stories of our world culture confronts us, the Exodus and the story of the golden calf. It's writing headlines in Calgary today. It shapes Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and it reminds us of slavery and those who make slaves and what happens to us, and also what happens when you set captives free. Now take a race of slaves exploited by another race that fears their number, needs their labor, and depends on their production. Give them a leader who demands their freedom, says God set him, and somehow has the ability to back that up with signs, wonders, and plagues that mess with all of the symbols of their exploiters. Force the issue until those slaves find themselves out there in a place called the wilderness, wherever that is, pursued by captors with seller's remorse, starving, thirsting, fighting because they don't like their neighbors out there any better than they did in captivity, crying because nothing's the same, leaning on the man who led them out, who didn't really want the job anyway, who has a rap sheet as a murderer, who lets his brother do the talking, and who is currently out of town, on a mountain, talking with the God who started all of this, something about hearing our cries and let my people go. And it's been over a month. What could possibly go wrong? Slaves have lost their rights to personal initiative. They know deprivation. No long-term thinking anymore. That's died. This reminds me of an international worker for our church who came back from a country where cheese was hard to find. She went to Safeway here in Canada and filled her buggy with cheese. And somebody said, you know, there'll be more tomorrow. But no, her mind didn't know that at that point. It had to relearn it. We all know what having plenty is, but then, do you remember COVID? Now, for that, multiply that by thousands and put those thousands of people deprived in a wilderness, and let's add to that an experience of a God they've never heard of, who doesn't do anything like the gods that they knew before, who keeps them from disaster when they cry out, but won't tell them what his name is, except to say that he is I am, that he has no image at all, and that I am generally means, I'll let you know as we go along who I am. Makes you long for something a little more substantial, doesn't it? Reminds me of a little girl who said to her mom once when she had an issue, Mommy, I know Jesus can help me, but right now I need somebody with skin on. So here's a question. How much uncertainty can you take before your confidence fails you? Before you come to the place where St. Paul says, To early Christians, you threw your confidence away. How much uncertainty can you take before your confidence fails you? For that was the question in the wilderness. I sympathize with the slaves in this story, but the fact remains that the God who brought them out of Egypt, who had helped them according to the promises he'd made before they were born, who was at that moment writing out a constitution to go with the covenant that he'd made with them that would make them a people, not a race of slaves, and who would give to them a place, who did not have a name you could put on a plaque, nor appear in any way that you could scratch on the wall of a cave for a reason, all of which was about to become very clear. What if they had all got up that morning and looked at their faces in the mirror, all of these slaves, and said this: God has not brought us here to fail. Let me say it again. God has not brought us here to fail. I pray that a lot. I pray it whenever something threatens the progress of the grace of God in my life or in someone else's life, in my family, in my church, in my country. God has not brought us here to fail. That's sort of a backwards way of saying God will continue to work. God will continue to be at work. God has not brought us this far to fail. What would happen in your life if every day you prayed that way? What if somebody had sent that memo? Cue the picture of the Egyptian god Hathor. But this is likely what the slaves knew from Egypt. This is the god Hathor, represented either in human or in animal form. The god of fertility, sexuality, music, love, maternity. The god whom you accessed by, frankly, stripping naked, getting drunk, and dancing until you were in touch with the spirit world, and after that doing who knows what with whomever else. And this is also what they would encounter on the way through the wilderness, and had likely seen among the traders who came to Egypt from Canaan, as their forefathers had done. Cue the picture from the British Museum. This is Baal. Once again, the bovine form. Once again, an animal on which people depended and would do for 2,000 years thereafter, right up until our present age. One in which you could create a religion for people whose main concern is for food and babies, and for using religion to get God's help in making them, and to have a little help from their enemies as well. Hey, Aaron, make us one of those. Because we don't know what we can't see right now. And this Moses, well, we don't know him, and he's out of sight and out of mind. You know how it is. While we're on the subject, now, permit me to mention that I'm just a little uneasy with our current penchant for making God according to one of his qualities. For instance, unconditional love or unmitigated wrath. Philosophers down through the ages have said to us that love without justice is a horror. Theologians have said love and justice without mercy is misery. And they've also said love and justice and mercy without grace is impossible. And love, justice, mercy, and grace without wrath is a joke played on us. When all of us come to all of God, represented in all of Christ, for all of his salvation, we will begun on the right path. Until then, we run the risk of playing golden calf. As they say, God loves you as you are, but he loves you far too much to leave you that way. So lucky Aaron, hired because Moses doesn't like public speaking, second in command and on duty when Moses is away, well aware of the people and what they can do because he's had to judge their differences and their disputes. Now, of all times, he's on deck when they want a God. Oratory won't get him through this one. This Moses, they say. Moses who? We don't know him. And Aaron will say, these people. Even God says, your people. Who owns the people and who owns up to God? By the time the story is over, we're asking the question, who takes responsibility for anything? This Moses. I could hear Aaron saying, so what happens if I say no? Take off the earrings from your wives and children and give them to me. That's Aaron's answer. I'll make you a god from the symbols of your slavery. So they did, and he did. And he smelted the gold, and as he would tell it later, out jumped the calf. And Aaron announced, here is your God. He might have meant, here is the God Moses told you about. He looks like this. Or maybe, here are your gods. They all look like this. Either way, doesn't feel right. And Aaron saw their excitement. Does it frighten him? Or is he just as excited at the opportunity that has just opened up for him? So, not only did he build a calf, but he built an altar. He built an altar and declared a festival the next day to consecrate the god. And the people brought sacrifices and bowed down to worship. Cue Henry Poussin's picture. Among the many choices, here is a very conservative Victorian depiction of the people, the slave race, dancing around the golden calf. There are other renditions of this that I would not show in church. And I am not going to dwell on this, but clearly Moses has got the people out of Egypt. He has not got Egypt out of the people. And I will not elaborate on the sexual revelry that went on, only to say this, that God has created human sexuality for the human realm, but the church has always said that sex is not found in God. Modern day would like to reinvest religion with sexuality, and the commandment was against that. Whenever we blend the two, both of them go wrong. Whenever we want to fix one or the other, our faith or our sexuality, we will deal with both. We would do well to heed the story of the golden calf. So, knowing the 10 Commandments, as you do if you've listened to Rock Point over the last while, how many commandments have we already broken in this story? No other gods, no graven images, no covetousness, no adultery. 0 for 4. 6 to go. One of the greatest but most difficult gifts to receive is the ability to live your life with someone you can't see, God. To begin moving towards God by following God's way, to line yourself up with others who do the same on a journey that has no immediate arrival point. To believe that this way and the giver of that way are everywhere. That you will never go anywhere where this giver, this God, can't be there for you. And that there is no other God at all. I was in West Africa, Côte d'Ivoire, in the town called Divo many years ago. And an Alliance International worker took me out in an evening in the dark to a campement, a very small village, where the people, some of whom are animists, were very much concerned because it had not rained. And the animals said to the Christians in the village, we want you to join with us and we will buy an animal together and make a sacrifice and then God will make it rain. The Christians thought, we cannot do this, but we will make a counter proposal. The international worker will bring a movie for you to see called Le Combat, which is about spiritual warfare and war with the spirits and faith in Christ. And the town will come and watch. I was there when that happened, with the generator running way off in the bush because there's no electricity. They showed that film. Then the Christians said, and we will pray. I left after that. I heard nothing more. Years later, here in Calgary, at Ambrose University, in the hallway, that same international worker stopped me and said, do you remember that night when we did this and this and this? And they prayed? Yes, I do remember. He looked at me and he said, it rained. That must raise 1,000 questions in your mind, and they're all legitimate. I only want to note a people who said there is a way to follow God. It is the way of faith. It is not the way of our performance or our manipulation of God. And it rained. The revelers around the calf likely thought, a mountain god can't see us here. Here we are in charge. But the God of Moses is also the God of everywhere, and he could see only too well. Now, on the mountain, the scene changes. Now it is God's turn to speak. Moses, do you see what your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, are doing? Your people, whom you brought out of Egypt. Excuse me? What happened to let my people go? Now, Moses, I'm going to do as I did with Noah. Wipe these people out and start again. And I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. These people of Abraham, they've broken that covenant. I'll start over again, and I will make of you, Moses, a great nation. Since you seem to be the only person around here who has the slightest idea of what it means to be faithful. Now, get out of my way so I can destroy them. Don't think God has had a relapse. His covenant provides for judgment, so does the cross of Christ. God is exercising his notwithstanding clause. But Moses, who is now the most solitary man in human history, who has trouble speaking to people, who is now staring down the wrath of God, must speak to God on behalf of the people. God, why do you want to destroy the people whom you just finished saving? God, do you really want the Egyptians to think you're a God of treachery? Little sidebar. We care about the Egyptians and what they think? Remember the nations. Do they know your glory? God, change your mind. God, remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There are a lot more people in this room than you can see. God, remember your oath. You swore to those people to make them and their descendants as numerous as the stars and to possess the land you promised. God, remember the nations. Apparently, God's glory is at stake in the fate of the nations, not just this slave race out there, as his covenant says. God, don't do it. You see, God cannot escape his own glory. God cannot escape his own nature, all of it. And Moses is calling on precisely that. God, I want you to be God. Let me ask you this question. Who cares enough about the glory of God that we've heard about for months here at Rock Point? Who cares enough about the glory of God to intercede for those who haven't got a prayer? Because that is the glory of Moses, to call forth the glory of God. God's glory isn't hanging in a museum somewhere so you can observe it and go home. Who is willing indeed to become the second Moses, the second lawgiver, and who is willing to die by the very law he himself gave, even if that death is the death of the cross? Who will become God's Christ? Jesus of Nazareth. Who will cry, Father, forgive them? Who will rise to live before a righteous God to intercede for us forever while we are still sinners? Showing what glory is all about. The glory of the only begotten one of the Father, full of grace and full of truth. Let me ask it a little further. Who by baptism will enter into the death of that same Christ so that they may live by his life and receive his glory, having it shine out from them as it never did with Moses? So says St. Paul. And who will take up the broken ends of the high tension wire of glory and holiness between the God of our Christ and the corrupt world that couldn't care less, refusing to let go until God is God, God is glorified, and nothing less than his creation is saved? Who cries, I've sung this at Rock Point, who cries this? Remember your people. Remember your children. Remember your promise, O God. Who cries out, for none of us can hold his glory fully, though we can reflect it truly for the homeless, the nationless, the hunted, the hated, the imprisoned, the addicted, for anyone who is dying without the knowledge of the saving glory of God. Who cries, Lord, change your mind?